Good morning, human anomaly David. An artificial voice spoke to him in the dark of his isolation hab. It is currently the 12th hour of the shipboard time. You have 3 hours until your quarantine is finished. It chirped while raising the light level for him to see, or maybe to keep him from going back to sleep. Yeah, he groaned. The artificial intelligence system of the ship didn't seem to understand humans yet. Thanks, Gavi. How is the rest of my team doing? He said as he stretched out his arms while standing. The rest of the human anomalies have been behaving, and their current health is in good order. However, a few have recently had a large spike in heart rate, it responds. It seemingly has not noticed its new nickname. Explain what you mean, he stated. Well, human anomaly, David. You and the rest of your team have begun to call for unknown entities that my sensors can detect. This ongoing behavior had started with human anomaly Andrew and has spread throughout each of you, slowing every one of you had begun calling out to these entities. It stated, it almost sounded like a scientist for a second. You have just called out to Gavi, human anomaly. Emma attempted to speak with a governor. And human anomaly Jackson began, and has not ceased to request information from a G-Dog, though I am certain that there are no Earth creatures of Canis lupus family on board. Of course, she did David had no choice now. Givi, do you have access to Earth's mental evaluation of humans? And if you do, please read over part 17G, he said, before going about brushing his teeth. Yes, it states that human anomalies are a socially sentient race that highly values family and friends. Their desire to bond with others is highly strong and deeply entrenched in their mental aptitude. The AI stated its monotone voice didn't add to the article, which David had to read a fair bit of. It also states that when lacking such bonding, they will attempt similar social paradigms with inanimate objects or non-sentient creatures. Yes, now take into account that aside from our short introduction to the captain, all 26 of us were shuffled into isolation habits, where our only point of interaction was you. David paused to rinse out the toothpaste for 5 Earth weeks. I do not see how this has caused you all to lose a portion of your cognitive functions. It responded, we aren't. We are all projecting our desire for social interaction on the thing we have been interacting with you. David answered, your designation is Givi. I was calling you Gavi, a human male name from my region of the Earth. Jackson, may God forgive her, gave you the nickname G-Dog, and Emmy was using a slang term from her region. He reached over to his files on the team and the crew of the ship. We are perfectly fine and do not need the screening. Please cancel the request for the medical staff. One moment, your answer does fit within the parameters of the article. I shall cancel the request, the AI said. For a second it seemed uncertain about the answer David gave, but there was no time for that, David. As a part of my function, I must file this insight with the Council S archives. However, I am obligated to ask if there is a way to avoid such things from happening. David pushed on the dossier he was reading. Well, I guess having a member of the medical staff come and speak with us on a semi-weekly basis would work. However, having a terminal to speak to each other with would also work. I see I have added your suggestions in the notes of the event. Thank you for helping, it said, replicating a cheerful tone. David knew the event wouldn't even reach the council, let alone the shipbuilder S Guild that makes the exploration ships. But it did cheer him up a bit. He still had work to do and flipped to the segment that showed a map, or more like maps of the ship. When the door finally opened, David stepped and looked over at the other 25 members of his team, stepped out of their habitats, and greeted each other with quick hugs and handshakes. Everyone smiled as they gathered around David. Okay, guys, you and I both know that the food in there wasn't too so good, he said with a nod of the head to his habitat for a second. So what do you say we have our first debrief in the mess hall while we eat something that isn't a nutrient block? He was expecting a simple nod of agreement, however. They all agreed in more of the joking at the quality of their meals way. That was fine with him. Morale had to be high for their part in the expedition. Also, I have some fun news. The onboard AI believed that we were all losing our minds. Moreover, I regret to inform you all that each of you owes me a week's wages. They all exchanged looks of confusion for a brief second before turning almost in unison to Engineer Andrew, who had for one part begun to turn a few shades of red. Frag all of you, Andrew snapped. It was so boring being stuck in there with nothing to do. Okay, David said with a slight grin. It's not his fault. Unlike most of you, he hadn't served or ever been to a GC station before now, affixing his eyes to the most embarrassing nickname given. After all, we can all be friends with G-Dog. Right, Jackson? He wasn't too sure if it was fair, but they all made bets. And as the Legion officer and team leader, he would hold them all to their bets. However, before he could speak, Pilot Oscar jumped in. OH, great. Then it's the wee lass that buys the drinks, he said, with a heartfelt chuckle. Of course, the Irelander that remembers the bet about alcohol. David chuckled to himself. Easy, guys. We aren't making a port for a few weeks, if not months. Moreover, I am sure that the captain is eager to get on the way. So let's get something to eat and then find our rooms. He could hear the sounds of pained adults being refused a chance to drink, but he didn't care. The sooner we eat and debrief, the faster I can go to check in with the captain. So, let's go. That finally got them going. As they walked, David could hear each of them giving Andrew some advice on how to hold out longer. They had made it to the mess hall, more accurately to the omnivore mess hall, and quickly pushed some tables together. Once everyone was seated and eating, David had a quick meal and got up to talk to them while they finished. Okay, Andrew, Emmy, Cole, and Jackson. The retrofit to the housing of the new shielding unit should be done by now. Get all the tests you need to be done as fast as you can and get it ready to power up too. The four of them gave him a thumbs up between mouthfuls of food. Oscar, Daniela, and Rick. Our shuttles will be in the hangar. Go ahead and make sure no one has messed with them. All three of them gave him a quick nod and went back to eating. Hans, Maya, Leilani, Anastasia, and Amari, your labs should have all of your equipment and gear. If anything is missing, contact me. He turned to the rest. Oz, for the rest of you, your gear and equipment are stored in the armory. And you also have a practice boarding session with the Chief of Security tomorrow at 0930. So please don't go too hard in training tonight. The last members of his team exchanged looks before one of them looked over. On that note, where's the gym? I'll show you later after I meet with the captain. David deflected, though mainly because he hadn't looked for it on his map yet. Any other questions? He said, trying to move the topic on. However, after a few seconds of everyone focusing on eating something that didn't have a texture like rubber and didn't taste like moldy cheese, he understood. Okay, good. Unless you need me, I'll see you all at 0700 tomorrow at breakfast. They all stared daggers at him for a time, but no one said a thing as he walked away. Shortly after leaving the mess hall on his way to the bridge, he was approached by a Lithrani. He saw them long before they had started to move, but he knew that some races still didn't like being approached by his one kind, so he kept walking. If David had to describe them, the Lithrani looked a bit like a scaly rabbit, but he would never say as much out loud. Their kind evolved on a cradle world, and one with few predators. Just about chest height on most humans, they had a hopping-like way of walking. They have a slim frame with just enough muscle structure to move, large rabbit-like eyes, and nose resting on a light muscle that gave way to two buck teeth. They are only visible because of their lips, which makes it look like they are always smiling. But their ears are the best way to gauge their emotional state, be it folded back with fear, upright at alert, or bent slightly with comfort. As they walked closer to him, David started recalling everything he could remember about their race. And from what he did remember, this one appeared to be a female of their kind. Her brighter colors and more angular scales are an evolutionary quirk of their homeworld, an attempt to seem poisonous to their only natural predators. She had a pattern of blues and yellows that shifted as her nose twitched. Excuse me, San Henri, but are you the Legion officer of the human anomalies on board? The Lythran asked once she was in earshot. Her voice sounded like a melody. Yes, I am David Solomon. It is a pleasure to meet and hear you, David said, and moved his head from left to right. It was the way humans could mimic the Lythran-esque greeting gesture. She stared at him for a second before a bright smile ran across her face. It is a pleasure to meet and hear you too, Dodd. She stopped and looked back at him. I apologize. Your name is hard for me. Can you say it again? It is pronounced David, but my friends call me Dav, he replied as he watched her work her way around his name. Is there something I can help you with? Having him speak snapped her attention back to him. Oh yes. The communications officer asks that Misan Henri bring this to you, she said, as she held up a large wrist device. Also that you should have your colony come and get theirs from the supply office. Colony, David muttered, confused for a moment before realizing what she meant. Oh, my team. Yes, I'll let them know as soon as I can. He nodded and tiled a bit at the hip, thank me, San Henri, for the speed and grace of this message. Oh, yes. She was stunned for a second. You are welcome, and please take care until our next passing, she said before walking away. David watched her for a minute as she continued down the hall and away from the bridge. Before turning his attention to the device, it was a standard item on GC ships. With an inbuilt communication array, a holo map of the ship with a guide marker, and could also communicate with the ship's AI. That, however, was the issue. The AI would tell the captain everything, and he and his team needed privacy. The bridge of this vessel was made with the understanding of nearly all Larashi crew, so looks a bit like a bowl with a few raised platforms closer to the middle. The captain was seated on the highest platform that had two stairways up the spiral around its support, mostly there for the races in the community that didn't have the gift of flight. The captain was an older Larashi, his once proud and bold colors fading to subtle grays and white that gave him an air of regality befitting his post. His beak was still hooked down slightly, and a part had been replaced by a gold-plated alloy of some kind. To David, the captain's race always reminded him of dodos of Earth's ancient past, albeit more evolved. Captain Clutho, Leashian Officer David Solomon reporting in, he said as he came to attention next to the captain. The old bird looked over and his eyes widened a bit. At ease, David, the captain said. This vessel is not a military one. Yes, Captain David, I have a question. The Givai says you would be able to answer, the captain said in a tone that gave David the idea that a prank had been pulled. Of course, sir. The AI has asked that I give him a moniker, a nickname as humans say. The captain watched David closely. Can you please explain to me why? David was stumped for one too many seconds before he forced his attention back. Yes, Captain. You see, I and the onboard AI had a misunderstanding this morning, in which I had called the Gavi, a name from my home region on Earth. David tried in vain to clear his throat. I believe it may have taken the idea of being given an easier name as a good one. I see. The captain mused over the information before letting out a few squawks, analogous to laughter. I think I shall use the name you gave it, David, he said, as he drew new air into his lunges. Gevai, I like the nickname Gavi. Do know that in my native tongue it means annoying. Captain, as per your request, I shall now acknowledge the name Gavi as an address to myself, the AI said from the captain's commanding chair to the squawking of the captain, who was joined by other Larishi officers in earshot. After a minute of laughter, the captain turned his attention back to David. So, seeing you on the command deck, you must have completed isolation. He eyed. And your clutch is settling in? Yes, Captain. I have also debriefed them as they were eating. Moreover, David started before being cut off. Human Legion officer, you are needed in the Medi Center, Gavi said in a disruptive and loud tone. David blanked out for a moment moreover. I had asked my team to get to work, and now I believe one if not more did something idiotic, David said, his voice controlled and calm. Forgive me, Captain. I'll see to that ever-foolishness my team had caused, and will handle it as best I can. He snapped back to attention, only breaking with a wave of the captain's arm. As David briskly walked to the Medi Center, one thought crossed his mind. Good thing whoever it is are in the Medi Center, because I am about to give them cognitive issues. As he walked into the Medi Center, he scanned the room before he heard the familiar voice. No, I'll be fine. Heard Cole say from an examination area. Look, just stitch it up. We don't understand what you are requesting, a doctor said. A note of helplessness, David stepped in and saw Cole gripping his forearm tightly through bloody fingers. Doctor, the medical procedure my colleague is requesting hasn't been seen by non-humans. However, we do have a combat medic on board with us, and I can call for her to perform it under your supervision, David said, while holding eye contact with Cole. Cole Smith, a brilliant engineer, and one of the few from his region to pass the screening process, wasn't he bad-looking, considering he is from Central North America. Light blonde hair and rich brown eyes are common out there, but on board the ship, he is one of only 5 that share the look. The Vishtani doctor studied David for a second, or perhaps he was spacing out, before finally speaking, yes, that is acceptable. I would like to see this stitching. The Vishtani, the closest thing to what bipedal Komodo dragons would be like, provided that they stood, on average, 5 feet tall. They themselves aren't bulky, however. Their scales had a twist in their design, having 2 plates at every connection. They can actually send the upper one flying away from them, both for defense and offense. Their heads were a snout that formed from their maws of sharp fangs. Being carnivorous meant that most other races didn't like them on first contact. However, their minds were brilliant, and they are often counted on to find solutions to issues others have. Great, David said before turning to the side. Gavi, please find and contact Angela and ask her to come here. Also inform her that she will be stitching someone up, he told his wrist device. Message sent. She is on her W, Gavi said before switching to broadcasting across the ship. All crew clear hallways, C-23, C-25, D-35, and stairwell C-11. This is not a drill. All crew clear hallways, C-23, C-25, D-35, and stairwell C-11. This is not a drill. Maybe I was too hasty with the information, David chastised himself. Well, at least she is on her way here, he said, as he turned back to Cole and the doctor, smiling gently. So, Cole, what happened exactly? Cole's blood went cold. Well, he stalled, waiting to organize his thoughts. Well, I was heading to my room when I saw a cool-looking girl, so I went and struck up a conversation. Stop. Cole, you are skipping details. Like the fact that this girl you were talking to was a Zandra Fane. David cocked his eyebrow in Cole. Allow me a second to guess what happened. You spoke to her and believed that she would allow you to feel her tail. But when you did so, she believed you were assaulting her and attacked you back, landing 5 deep razor-like cuts on your arm. How? The doctor babbled, how did you know it was a Xandran feign? He looked shocked at David. Well, Engineer Cole here is one of my team and signed off on his right to privacy during the selection process, David said, with sass creeping in. That's right, Cole. I know exactly what you surfed up before and during boot camp. With a quick wink. Almost on cue, the Medi Center door slid open, revealing the slightly sweaty form of combat medic Angela. She had seemingly run there at most likely full speed. She rushed over to David in 2 quick bonds and lifted him a bit off the ground. Who was hurt? Where are they? How are their vitals? She barked in rapid fire at David. Cole, 5 deep cuts across the arm, he said calmly and pointed a finger over. He is over there and is fine but has a broken heart. The Mediterranean combat medic was one of 2 people on the human crew that David would genuinely call an Amazon. Her body was well cared for, and she doesn't waste time when working out. Her blonder hair was a gift from her mother, her eye color coming from her father, a deep blue. She let David go and sighed. The tension in her muscles washed away. For Gaia's grace, please Dawn to let the AI deliver messages. I thought someone was dying and walked over to Cole. Okay, let me see the damage. Cole may be a great engineer but is also dumb sometimes. However, he and everyone on the team know their 2 rules. The first is Angela is an angel and should be listened to. Second, Angela is a demon and should be listened to. And Cole didn't he hesitate and followed her orders. Well, the good news is I don't think anything important was cut. Moreover, stitches will not be necessary, she said as she looked over the cuts. Some disinfectant and a bandage on your arm for a week. Swirling on the balls of her feet, she turned to the doctor. Do you have a Class 2 wound disinfectant, along with a Class 1 roll of medical cloth? Yes, the doctor stammered. 1 second, I'll retrieve some before rushing over to a cabinet on the side of the room. It took the doctor a few seconds before returning and handing Angela everything she requested, and then watched in amazement as she quickly and efficiently treated the wounds. Well, Smith, she started while dusting her pants. You're very lucky, she just missed a main vein in your arm. And in the manner she cut, you made clean cuts. She reached over and yanked on Cole's ear. But if you get hurt again in the next week, I will let you die. Putting more force on the last 3 words. Miss Angela, while you are very skilled, the doctor began, I must say that your threat of entropic finality is unbecoming of a medical professional, looking outraged at the human combat medic, his scales expanding a bit. Oh, well, I meant more in the metaphorical. She replied with a warm smile. He will still be alive. However, will most likely never be able to live that life out. I see. The doctor paused, uncertain how to proceed with this information. Right. Cole, go wait outside. I need a word with you, David said, seeing a need to smooth the tension out, and watch Cole for a second as he stepped away. Angela, the good doctor here, didn't mean to insult you or your bedside manners. He is, however, one of the ship's doctors, and as such he must safeguard the lives of everyone, including Mr. Smith. That seemed to relax her a bit. And doctor, believe me when I say Angela has, due to no fault of her own, had to tend to the wounds of that team member for the better part of a year thus far. On a nearly daily basis, David explained and watched as the Vishtani S scales smoothed out. Now, Angela, David walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. The doctor, while he knows about us, seems to need a bit of help catching up on human medical practices. He gestured at the doctor with his free hand. Would you be so kind as to aid him, so that he will be able to tend to our wounds? She snapped her eyes to him, staring into his eyes for a moment before realizing the undertone of his statement. Oh, yes. She turned back to the doctor and extended her hand. Forgive me, doctor, she said with a genuine smile. I am Lieutenant First Class Angela Villa. It is a pleasure to meet you. The doctor looked at her stunned for a second before reaching out to shake her hand. Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you too. I am Medical Officer Zalet. He stared in disbelief at the speed with which her posture and attitude shifted from anger to happiness. I will say that I am still curious about this stitching, the one called Cole spoke of. Oh, well, of starters, stitching is the layman's term. In the medical field, it is called sutures. It's a method to tend. Angela began to explain to the doctor while David walked away. David walked out of the Medicenter, only to walk right into his next problem. As he saw Cole being surrounded by security personnel, accompanied by 2 Zondraphanes. Cole, for his part, had stayed calm, even as the guards asked him very pointed questions, while the Xandradane officer, based on her uniform, demanded Cole be arrested. As soon as Cole spotted David, he yelled, David, help! Xandradanes are recognized as the female variant of the Xandrafane race, standing on average 5 feet tall. They are actually 6 feet long due to their digitigrade legs that end in clawed toes. Their homeworld is a Class 3 death world, and is often described as a redwood forest in near-constant twilight. Their humanoid face makes them one of the few races most humans agree are attractive. Their eyes are wolf-like in nature, and have a color ranging from blue to yellow, and they have canine ears of a few shapes, but wolf ears are most common and rest near the top of their heads. They are also one of the few omnivores in the community, and that shows in their teeth which sit under full lips. The Xandradanes are normally slimmer than their male counterpart, favoring an athletic build of gymnasts. They have a coat of fur that covers all of their body and can range from black to blue, and while patterns are rare, they are a few with stripes. Despite the fur, they do grow hair, in the human understanding, atop their heads, and above the eyes, and a few males have been known to grow beards. Their need for balance has given them a tail, although the shape and size vary. The most common one is that of a fox. Their people have a rather unique hand structure, being paws that have enough space between joints to work a bit like a human hand, under which claws hide. David, not wasting time, walked over to the guard, questioning Cole, and said, in his calmest and stern voice, "Excuse me, I am the liaison officer of the human crew on board. May I ask what is happening here?" The Cole cash guard looked over at David and grumbled something in his native dialect before speaking. "The human here has been accused of malicious assault of a fellow crew member I see. As his liaison officer, I wish to speak with his accuser. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding of some kind," David stated, in a frank and censor tone. The Xandrandane officer's wolf-like ears twitch, and she walked right up to David, her eyes staring daggers at him, while her silvered coat of fur shifted as she moved. Her eyes were a rich amber, and her hair was a wild mane like that of an Amazonian, and her face showed her dislike at David's insinuation of a misunderstanding. While her uniform hides a lot from her form, she shows signs of a powerful physique. While her foxtail whips with irritation, there is no misunderstanding. She hissed, "Your pack member assaulted one of mine. He will pay for his transgression." David watched the officer for a moment before crossing his arms over his chest and tilting his head, mimicking the Xandranfane-esque male greeting stance. "I am David Solomon, the human legion officer for this vessel, and am humbled by your address to myself," he said before relaxing. "However, my teammate is what your race calls Gandon, and he meant no harm or ill intent." The Xandrandane officer stepped back, staring David down a bit wide-eyed, before narrowing in again. "If what you say is true, then he would know of our customs as you do, yet he didn't he?" Her voice sounded resolute that she had them trapped now. "Explain that?" David knew the answer, however, knew she wouldn't take it from him. He gave his best confused face and turned to Cole. "She has a point, Cole. You should know more than me about their customs." He gave Cole a wink out of her line of sight. "Where did you learn about their race?" Cole watched his only way of resolving these throw him to the wolves, but caught on a second after. Well, most of my research was on the human data net," he said plainly. "I haven't had a chance to access the galactic data network yet." "I see," David said, faking a constrained voice. "These would explain the issue." He turned back to the Xandrandane. "The human data net, unfortunately, only has very little information on your race, due mainly because of our distance from each other." He looked over to the other Xandrandane and back to the officer. "He is a Gandon, however. His information on your kind and your customs and traditions is basically non-existent." David thought hard for a second. The Xandranfanes were and still are a powerful warrior race that lives in a loose but strict matriarchal society. Normally, it would be Cole's mother or sister that would decide how he would repay this, and because of this, the situation was bad. However, there was a way. "Forgive me if I am wrong," David said as calmly as he could. "Your race has a tradition of workers for restitution, correct?" Gesturing an open hand to the officer in front of him. "Yes, however, it is only the offended that can accept this," she said, as the girl behind her moved closer. "What would you suggest?" The Xandradane behind the officer had a wild mane of hair too, however. Her fur color was a light blued gray, and her eyes were a deep green. "1 week, ship time." David said, keeping his voice level. "Engineer Cole will spend his free time helping and aiding you in your work and non-personal matters," he said, turning his head past the officer and addressing the girl. "During which time, hopefully, he will learn more of your people and your ways. If that is agreeable to you?" She hesitated, her ears twitching as she thought, before looking at Cole and then back to David. "I think that will be okay. I enjoyed our conversations, and in light of what you said as actions." She stopped, her gaze hardened while unacceptable. "They do make sense, great, so he will start tomorrow. Both he and I just got out of ISO. I'll make sure he stays out of your fur." David said while maintaining a cool head, although I do need a way to stay in contact with both of you, just in case his stupidity gets the better of him. As he moved his hand with the palm up, a gesture for a request in their culture, the officer hesitated before gently raising David's hand closer to him and said, I am Alaris Hincarno, liaison officer to the Zondrafane pack aboard this vessel, before closing her hand a bit and lowering his hand back to its original position. The girl walked up and raised David's hand too. I am Kiga no Alaris Hincarno. It is a pleasure to meet you, she said, watching David as she did. I'm a lab assistant before lowering David's hand past the starting positions, signaling that the request has been fulfilled. If everyone could hear thoughts, a loud click would have rung out from David's head just now. Forgive me if this is presumptuous, David said in a slow and deliberate tempo. But you are Alaris' daughter? Before Kiga could answer, Alaris stepped in. Yes, she is getting between Kiga and David. I see, this all makes more sense now, David said with a step back. Not to be rude, but how old is Kiga if she were on Zandra? It asks none of, Alaris started to say before Kiga cut her off. 22 alignments, she said over her mother's shoulder. In 2 weeks will be my killa hinner, she continued, despite her mother's growling. David absorbed the information for a second, given their day pre-year count compared to Earth, along with the oddities of their culture. Kiga, in Earth terms, would be about 20 years old, moreover. She would have her coming-of-age celebration soon, too. That is wonderful news, David said calmly. I wish you a great life and light for the rest of your days. Alaris let out a sigh, David. You do your people as moniker proud. We thank you for your wishes and the spirit it has been given. Before turning her daughter around and pushing her away a few steps before they started to walk together, David's attention switched to the Clo Cash Guard. It seems the matter was indeed a misunderstanding. Can you please not file this incident? I will see to Engineer Smith's discipline personally while bobbing his head a bit from side to side. The guard muttered again before saying, That is fine. It seems you have a silver tooth, David Solomon, before walking away with some of the other security guards. Cole sheepishly looked over to David. So how badly did I mess up? David let out a long and drawn-out groan. That S-bad Cole shifted where is sat you. Cole lucked the hell out, David said in an agitated tone. The one that cut you is the first daughter of the Zandrafane liaison officer. Moreover, in terms of Earth's social standards, she is above the age of consent. Cole's face shifted to gleeful idiocy. However, her mother chose to avoid an intergalactic incident by not tearing you limb from limb. Cole blanked out for a second. Wait, what? Oh yeah, in her culture it would be 100% okay. David stared at Cole, his cold death stare cutting deep. If she chooses that even Angela would be able to stitch you back together. But I got them to agree to short-term slavery instead. Cole now switched back to confused. Yeah, you are, for the next week. During your free time going to be Kiga's butler. Effectively wait. Free time like no downtime? Cole's mind seemed to have a different sense of priorities, David. Thought about it for a second, giving Cole false hope. Yape, no downtime unless for sleeping. You start tomorrow as he started to walk. Now come on, I need some extra hands. After David and Cole's quick stop at the supply office, they both parted ways. David headed back to the Medi Center to give Angela a communicator, and Cole got everyone else theirs, with David then making his way back to the bridge. As David walked in, the captain was talking to the Clocash security chief. Not wanting to interrupt David stood a respectable distance. The Cole Cash, while their towering stature is impressive, it is their proclivity to take to tasks that others would hate that gives them a fantastic attitude toward being guards or security. Standing about 7 feet tall on the low end and 12 on the high, they are giants in the community. Their fur is usually around the length of half a foot, but beneath is a coat of quills that, yes, they can shoot out as a form of attack. Standing in a quadrupedal stance resting on the knuckles of their hand, they are often compared to apes when running. They can support themselves on their legs alone, but prefer not to. Their faces are like that of a flat-faced bear. However, it does not reach far from their body due to a smaller neck structure. Being herbivores has done no end of confusion to human scientists when humanity joined the community, however. That didn't make them fantastic friends, even if they have some secrets. From the little he could overhear, the last of the supplies for their extended stay in the unknown regions had been delayed, and the chief was not happy. Something about his herd mates needing something he didn't know. Their conversation came to an end a minute later, and the chief walked out, seemingly more agitated than normal. The captain looked like he was done for the day, but still, turned to David and waved him over. David, I hear that Alaris has met her match today. Care to tell me how you beat her, Wit? The captain said, a bit of a chirp in his voice. Oh, well, unfortunately I do not know, Captain. David said, fanning ignorance. I just used what I knew of her culture and customs. Oh, you are familiar with Zondrafane culture. Remarkable, the captain said, his voice sounding happier. Tell me how you are so knowledgeable about her people? Well, Captain, David said carefully to pick the right words. When my team and I were being prepared, I studied the cultures and traditions of all the species on board. The Human Republic figured that, as the liaison officer, that I would have to be the one too. Paused for a second. Soften the ground, if you will. The captain eyed David for a few seconds before squawking a few times. I see a prudent choice on their part. You are certainly an anomaly. The captain gestured to the command chair, and David kept in step. So, David, it seemed to me you were in the middle of a request when we spoke earlier. I was, David said, as they reached the halfway point on the stairway. My team, mainly due to the quarantine, need a chance to stretch their legs and relax. Molt their feathers, he added. Well, I was hoping you would allow us leave for a few hours onto the station. David had a good feeling about the answer, but waited on the captain as he sat in his chair. The old bird let out a whistle. Yes, I do believe that is all right. The captain looked down for a second or two. As much as I would like to depart, we are still lacking some vital supplies we need. To be forward, I don't think we will be leaving for at least a week, he said as he shifted in his set, almost like he was nestling in. Shit, we can await that long, David thought as he took in the news. If it's not above my station, may I ask what these supplies we are missing? Forcing a neutral tone. The captain looked over at David. Well, the main one that we can buy here at the station is the Clo Cash supplement. I believe it's a compound mixed in water. The final product has a compound structure of C2H5OH. The captain said, his voice filling with disappointment. Sadly, we don't to know how they make it or where it comes from. David felt like what he imagined a deer in headlights would feel like. Did you say C2H5OH? Yes, but don't worry, it will get here when it gets here. I told the chief to ration what they have left, the captain replied, looking to David at the end and then recoiling in terror. David had realized too late what he had done and quickly covered his mouth. Grinning was a big rule for all humans out in space. Apologies, Captain, he said while calming down, but I believe I can help remedy these issues without needing to wait on the supply ship. He had to also be careful on how to produce. I wouldn't to get into the specifics, but I believe I can have the needed compound delivered to your ship in a few hours. However, as per Article 502 to the Galactic Council Law, I can tell you how, and would require a closed channel to the Earth Diplomatic Services headquarters. The captain regained his composure and stretched the alloy plate on his beak. Every well, the captain said, before standing up and calling out, Comms, get Officer David a close line to EDS and then clear out all of you. David didn't waste time, choosing to simply jump off the raised platform the command chair was on. He quickly walked over to the comm station as all, but the captain cleared out. EDS, this is GEV 105. Come in. GEV 105, we read you loud and clear. How can we help? A thick Germanic voice responded. David leaned in a bit. This is David Solomon, clearance code G5PNC1. We need enough beers of the lowest alcohol content for 5 months delivered to this ship as soon as possible. David, we require a reason for such mission priority 1. Tabbies simulate is beer. The supply ship from their home system is a week behind schedule, David replied before the operator could finish. Understood. Good work. The supply ship will be arriving in 5 Earth hours. Please be on standby for retrieval, a deep Britannia voice responded. EDS, out. David stood up straight up and turned to the captain. Done, sir. I'll have my team help unload the supply in vacuum suits, he said as he started walking. The supplies should arrive in 6 ship hours, sir. That captain eyed David for a few seconds. I do know you humans are odd, but the way you acted suggests your people know what the stimulus is. A lightly accusatory tone carried in by the captain. However, you have given us a chance to depart on time. Thank you, sir, David responded. And about the shore leave for me and my team? As soon as you unload the supplies, the captain waved his hand. You can have 3 ship hours. If you aren't aboard, we will leave you behind. David gave the captain a quick salute before heading to the cabins of the ship to look for his team. So that's the deal, David said to the team, having gathered them up in one of the common areas that they had kept empty with death stares and loud words in English. It's amazing how fast everyone on this ship runs when Deathworlders speak loud enough in a language they don't know them to know. The supply ship should be docking in about 3 Earth hours. Then we get our void suits on, we unload, hand off the supplies to the Clo Cash herd, and then go get drunk on the station. He looked at his team, seeing more than a few overlays enthusiastic faces. Finally, someone realized that the supplies weren't for them and was stupid enough to ask, "What has been delivered exactly?" before a sharp and audible smack was heard. "Why in the name of Gaia are you asking?" It's classified, the disgruntled voice of Sergeant Hirth carried. Hirth Coldman, one of the few here David would call a friend, started as a grunt in the ranks. When David was given command of their fire team, his frame is bulked from muscle training, but he had most, if not all, of his muscle mass replaced by cybernetics. He did it so he could, quote, tear him apart when I am out of ammo. His skin is a deep brown from his ancestry from Central Africa, and despite his station and sometime rough demeanor, he is in fact the nicest member on the team. Yes, it is classified, David confirmed. And when you unload what you see, you keep to yourselves until the death of this reality, his voice emanating authority. Now, Break, I do believe the security chief will be arriving soon. And I don't want him to think a fight may break out, so do something other than being here. It took the better part of a minute, during which time David got a drink and sat down to read reports from the team. Just as he was getting to the last drops, the chief and a handful of guards came down the hall. Liaison Officer Solomon. The chief grumbled as he walked him. I have received no less than 17 complaints about your herd. Shaking his fur to allow for his quills to flex outwards more easily, and 20 requests for reassignment to different cabin areas. Care to explain? Yes. But first, may I ask for you to keep the crew from venturing in while we hash this out, David said as he slowly disposed of the drink-s container. Before turning his attention back to the chief, you will want this to stay between us. The chief eyed David for a few more seconds, then David was comfortable, but eventually nodded. And two of his escort moved to block the door, and he said, HFY, Dark Fog Protocol, code GV05SC1 code and voice print confirmed. Active data scrubbing in effect, the Gavi chipped back. So, human, do you want to tell me what this is about? The chief said, while walking over to the table David was seated at. Well, to make it simple, I am doing you a favor, and I want one in return, David said in a careful tone. EDS is sending a supply ship up to dock with us. On board, there is about 5 months' worth of your stimulants. While resting his elbows on the tabletop, well, an Earth equivalent. The chief looked at David before the sound of scraping metal sounded from the chief. Clo-cash laughter is horrible to human ears. Good jest, I almost believe you. Oh, I am not joking. Moreover, this isn't an attempt to threaten you. David waved his hand. After all, we make it for fun and have more than enough to share. His voice was cool and collated, despite the danger he had put himself in. And of course, the nature and manufacturing of it will be made a national secret on Earth too. A gesture of goodwill from humanity to the Clo-cache. David heard the telltale sounds of metal being bent from under the chief, but didn't avert his eyes. Moreover, I have kept the truth of how to make C2H5OH a secret from the captain by activating an old law of the Galactic Council. So, humanity has both the means and access to our stimulants. That is unfortunate news, but it could be in worse hands, the chief said as he relaxed a bit. So, what do you want in return for this magnanimous gesture? Well, the training you wanted to run with the human contingent, I would like for it to be moved back a day, David said while hiding his wolfish grin. You would supply us for our voyage for just 1 day? Why? The chief narrowed his eyes. Well, once we are done unloading, we are taking a short shore leave to unwind and relax, David said bluntly. Also, as a bit of this leave, more than a few of us will be drinking ethanol products, which will mean that those who are meant to go for the training will be unable to arrive on time, if at all. I have read of your kind's odd obsession for poisoning yourselves and the after effects. The chief seemed to ruminate on the information. Very well. You can tell your herd that the training has moved. Have the stimulants moved to my office. I am glad we could agree. David gave a constrained smile. The supply ship should be here in 3 ship hours and 10 minutes. David got up as he spoke. By the way, next time you have a chance to try the beer Blue Moon, it is my favorite, and walked out to leave the chief. It took the better part of an hour, but eventually, the entirety of the human complement was in the hangar in sealed void suits. David could help but feel a bit nostalgic for the active military members. Their suit had stronger padding and armor plating along with a cybernetic muscle structure to enhance their strength, while he was stuck with a civilian contractor suit, still the same but no funny stuff. So, is our suit's comms a closed network? Cole spoke into his helmet, arms waving a bit to get David's attention. Human anomaly. Cole, for safety, the communications are currently open and will be closed when the supply ship finishes docking, Gavi answered. Oh, Cole said. And don't stand close to the ship. I can't fix a crushed skeleton, Angela chimed in. Human anomalies. The supply ship is on final approach. Gavi notified them as the silhouette of the ship came up from below the hangar's open door. The ship was a basic supply type. A forward-facing control station was attached to a long superstructure that pulled back into a corridor about 8 feet wide. Along the sides were cargo pods that could be accessible from the interior of the ship. The bridge was on the lower side of the control center and had a bubble canopy facing downwards. The three landing gears lower down and magnetically locked with the floor. David took his chance and signaled the pilots to open the rear ramp. Supply ship docked, disconnecting from the network, Gavi said. Okay, let's get going, Oscar said, starting to move to the rear of the ship. The rest of the team followed him. As David reached the top of the rear ramp, the team was crowded around one of the access ports. A few of them pointed, others staring blankly. It was Hans that turned to David. Why is the ship full of beers? David let his sigh be loud enough to get everyone's attention. The Clo-Cash compound that they drink is beer. Very weak beer, but beer, as he walked past them and grabbed a crate. Now, come on. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we get to go drink something.